what's going on, guys? Fl4k here with a brand new build here for you. This is Flak Skellington. It's going to be revolving around some of the new terror gear and the Vindicator Gas Call. Let's get right into the build, and then we'll go right into the items that I'm using, and we'll show you a little bit about what this build can do. So in the red tree, we're starting off with Interplanetary Stalker. It is maxed out, but with the +4 points into the Paradigm class mod that we're using, Interplanetary Stalker gets a huge boost to 9 out of 5. Some of our main skills are going to be going into this, especially the damage. Now, Leave No Trace is really good because it's going to be our crits and we get ammo back for it. Head count, this is super important for our rack attack action skill, so that we can get as much action skill cooldown back as possible. Hunter's Eye is a pretty good skill just to move down the tree a little bit more. We don't need Second Intention, Ambush Predator, or Two Fang, so this is a good secondary skill just to move down the tree further. Big gain for Hunter skills, effective and longer duration. The most dangerous gain for gun damage, crit damage, and pet damage is basically going to be the primary thing for this one. Grim Harvest is super important as we get gun damage and action skill damage. We need it mostly for the action skill damage, however, gun damage is also fairly nice. Galactic Shadow is going to be for the crit damage, however, you also get some AoE, or not AoE, you get some aggro taken off of you and the pet takes it. This was a recent flak buff that happened a couple months ago. And Megavore, so that we can score some crits against any part of the enemies. Into our green tree, this is going to be our support skill tree. We're not going to be using this for any damage or anything like that. This is just our support self-repairing system, so that whenever oh no, sorry, we just got maximum health and regeneration of health. We don't have to have any prerequisites for this. We just get max HP and regeneration of HP. Eager to Impress is going to coincide with head count, so that whenever we kill an enemy, we get action skill cooldown time reduced. All my BFFs, allies share a portion of Flak's total health regeneration, and Flak's pet shares twice the amount of health regeneration. I put 1 point into here because 17% is pretty good, and we also need our pet to stay alive. Having our pet staying alive is going to be super useful for the augments in the red tree, which we'll cover right away. Lick the Wounds, it's really good if you make a mistake. You get a revive from your pet and your pet gets damage. Blue tree, Ferocity was just to move down the tree with 3 points, because eventually you need to get down to pack tactics. Persistent Hunter for action skill duration and gun damage. The duration doesn't really do anything for you, but the gun damage is nice. Go for the Eyes just to move down the tree. Frenzy and He Bites, they stack with each other so that you can get some damage. Who Rescued Who just to move down the tree a little bit more, but you get some regeneration of HP. Psycho Head and a Stick, whenever Flak kills an enemy, which we're going to be doing a lot, our pet gets increased movement speed and damage. This is going to help increase the movement speed for pet, so that our pet can get to us faster for Lick the Wounds in case we go down. Barbaric Yacht for pet bonuses, we get pet bonuses going into our Spider-Man Scorcher, super useful. And pack tactics, so that we can get maximum HP and damage for both me and pet. Augments this time, we're rocking with Spider-Man Scorcher with the elemental damage going to 30% because of Barbaric Yacht. We're going to be swinging for a few different elements so that we can get multiple benefits off of this. I'm also going to be using Rack Open a Cold One for the Cryo Racks, because I believe Cryo Racks are better than Fire Racks. Cryo is going to be more of a neutral element, whereas Fire has more resistances against shielded enemies, and we face a lot of shielded enemies with this build. Rack Accelerate, we get cooldown rate and additional charge. That way we don't have to spend and waste an annoyance on an additional charge. Plus the cooldown is super useful with things like head count and Eager to Impress. So with the build itself, we're going to be rocking the Fearmonger as one of our main weapons. While Terrified, we gain increased damage and fire rate. The more terror stacks that we have, the more bonuses that we're getting. Now, terror can stack up to 3 times. So you get stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 of fear. And the way that you can tell the difference between the stages is how dark green your corners of your screen are going to be. We got to use a lot of corrosive, so that way you can see a little bit how this build comes together with all the corrosion. I use a light show with next 2 megs cryo. I have corrosive for the damage bonuses that we're going to be receiving, and next 2 megs cryo, so that in case something resists corrosion, we have something as an alternative. The same thing with the flipper. It's going to be corrosive for our main damage source, but extra shock so that we can shred through shields, just in case we find something with corrosive resistances. Now this is a little bit of a different like hybrid style build. If you want to go down that route, I'd hold the prompt critical or anything with 5150, because if you have the prerequisites of the URAD, like if you're using a front loader or a deathless, your skulls are actually going to be getting the bonus radiation. So if you don't want to use this old god that we're using, it comes with corrosive damage, and on action skill end you can apply terror to yourself. Instead, if you want to use a front loader with apply terror to yourself and have the prerequisites of URAD, you can do that and hold this weapon, and all the skulls that are coming out will get that bonus radiation damage. So you're swinging for corrosion and radiation. If you want to go that route, this can hybrid to it very, very well. The Vindicator Gas Call is going to be basically our main source of damage. What's going to be happening is we're going to be combining with the Peregrine. So whenever Rack hits an enemy, they drop a grenade for free, which is the Vindicator Gas Call. Now, Vindicator is the hybrid between two different gas calls. It is the roided and it's the cloning. So we get the grenade damage, and we also get the cloning effect to split. Now, the Vindicator Gas Call, the Gas Call special ability by itself is the more terror stacks that you have, the more skulls that are going to split and home in on enemies. If you're at max terror, and if you're using a cloning or Vindicator Gas Call, you can have 24 ghosts spawn with either with any grenade type of thrown. So if our rack hits an enemy, 24 ghosts spawn and 24 ghosts will home in on enemies. If I throw a grenade at max terror stacks, 24 ghosts by default. Now this is always going to roll in corrosion damage, so we're getting our corrosive boost with our old god shield, and finally our flesh melter victory rush. So whenever we kill a badass, now badasses appear everywhere on Mayhem 10, we get increased damage and movement speed. Now this is specific flesh melter victory rush gives us grenade damage, which is our Vindicator Gas Call, corrosive damage, which is our Vindicator Gas Call because it's always corrosive, and area of effect damage. Vindicator Gas Calls does corrosion splash, so that corrosive splash is going to have a bigger area of effect, thus doing more damage. If we ever kill an enemy with corrosion, which is all of our weapons and our gas call, we increase our damage with corrosive for a short duration. So if any one of these hundreds of ghosts that are spawning in, or if any of our weapons do a kill, all of our sources of corrosion damage will slightly increase, which means it's going to stack with our old god, it's going to stack with all of our corrosive weapons, it's going to stack with our gas call, and we're doing tons and tons of damage. This Peregrine you've probably seen before. This one is the splash damage, weapon damage, and action skill damage. I had this on a previous Fl4k preview. The action skill damage is rack attacks. The splash damage is going to be from the Fearmonger and the gas call. And the weapon damage is just going to be any weapon I have in my hand. If you're successful with getting your terror stacks to 10 seconds, because we get terror stacks every 3 seconds for 18 seconds, at our 10th second, whenever we're throwing out nades at max terror, we should be getting hundreds and hundreds of homing ghosts in on enemies. Kind of like this. So I start the battlefield by activating this just so I can get some terror stacks rolling preemptively, and now we can get right into general mobbing. Now we had a kill with our ghost just back there, so now all of our corrosive damage is going to be increased. We have max terror because this is the darkest green that my screen can get. That way I know that this is max terror. And now look at all the ghosts just taking over. You can keep on spawning them. You can kind of sit back and relax if you need to. You got to be careful because the way that I've been blowing myself up is the corrosive splash that's coming from the gas calls. If you get hit by the corrosive splash, you probably will be downing yourself pretty easily. These ghosts are still spawning and still going. Even though all the enemies are dead, those ghosts spawn for at least 4 or 5 seconds after everything has been cleared. This is just some of the potential of the mobbing power of this build. Now, can it do bossing? Not as efficiently. Unfortunately to say, it doesn't do it as efficiently. But when you have hundreds and hundreds of corrosive ghosts homing in on enemies, and if those bosses spawn with mobs, you can kill the mobs with corrosive damage, thus proccing your flesh melter, and you can actually get a lot of corrosive damage coming through at the same time. It's very important to keep track of your rack attack. I was kind of screwed there and wasn't able to do much. It's very important to keep track of your rack attack casts, because if you don't have any rack attack cast, you can't spawn your gas call for free. Because right now I'm out of gas calls, and I have max SDUs, which is 13 grenades. I have no other way to boost my grenade count, unfortunately, because I'm flak. So I have to be very, very careful with my rack attack casting. I was a little bit rack attack happy there, but still not really a problem. You can clear very, very easily. I've done both takedowns with this build already, and I've done both true takedown versions of this build already. The pure crowd control and mobbing, nothing can really keep up with it. Now, I did need a little bit of assistance in the Guardian takedown. I actually had to switch to the URAD version of this build, which I displayed a little bit earlier, the hybrid, because I needed that radiation damage to swing through on the Guardians. So I needed a little bit of assistance there. The Flipper and the Light Show, with their next two megs, with Cryo and Shock, were able to clear off shielded enemies pretty easily, and anything with armor just gets completely melted off in seconds flat. I'm still gaining terror, even though I'm not in mobbing situations, and the terror just expired, but I was all the way up to max terror for quite a long period of time. So I mentioned that bossing isn't really the greatest for this build. However, I will still show bossing because that's just what builds do. So I will meet you guys at Tront. And we're back. Okay, so we're at Tront here. We have some max terror, so we're just going to see what this this little nifty build can do to Mr. Tront. So this is going to be pure corrosion going against his shield, which is not the most ideal. But even though it's corrosive versus shield and his HP, even though that's supposed to do resistances, all those ghosts, even without the flesh melter boost, completely shreds them off. A few things to keep in mind about the build is you may have noticed that I have buddy system on. So buddy system can be targeted. It can be targeted by your rack attacks, and the floating skulls, like the normal ones, the badass ones, the loot ghosts, they can also be targeted by rack attacks. So if you're using a rack attack and you have a buddy system in your way, usually the Nova itself will blow them up, but they can also be singularly single target targeted to get destroyed and blow up, whereas some things can't target buddy system, like Zane's clone, for example. Other things to keep in note: if you need the shield regeneration, we do have the shield reboot skin on, or ability on. This is very important as well, so that you can get some shield regeneration. Especially if you're using the URAD version, you definitely want shield reboot. There's some few things to play around with in the build. There's the front loader, like I mentioned earlier. There's also an atom bomb deathless with area of effect damage and radiation damage. So if you don't want to use a front loader and you want to use the old god with corrosive, you can switch to the atom bomb deathless. It comes with a cut purse launch pad just so you can do guardian takedown. Pearl if you want to play around with those, because I did some testing with it as well. All of these very, very viable. There's a few other things to play around with. There's some refluxes, some smogs, bloodstarved beasts, major kongs, and all elements. Backburners if you want to play around with those. Plague bearers if you want to play with those. Just some general farming that I had as well. Unseen threat with 390s, old gods. A lot of fun things. It's piss grenade with the increased damage and fire rate, also a pretty nice nade for just general terror builds. That's the build. This is Fl4k Skellington. I hope you guys enjoy. My name is B Flattened, and I'm signing on out of here. Take care, all. Laters.